right face. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. Okay, thank you very much. You may be seated. Hello, my name is Rick Mullins. I'm Vice President of Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 15. Can everybody hear me? I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I hope you all received a package when you entered the door from the Young Marines as you came into the Civic Center. They include commemorative pins, Vietnam pins, and various other items. There are also caps available for the veterans. There are 2 tables at the side of this hall, one with commemoration materials and one with VVA 15 and Joint Veterans Honor Guard materials. We are presently recruiting for the Joint Veterans Honor Guard. I want to thank the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 15, David Kovach, and everyone who helped to coordinate tonight's program. We extend our gratitude to Mayor Matt Burke and the City of Garfield Heights for allowing us to use the Civic Center for this commemoration event. We want to acknowledge the Young Marines for assisting us in making this program a success. Can we all give a round for the Young Marines? And I want to give a special thank you that goes out to Mr. Paul Huff from VVA 15 for securing many of the sponsors who made this night possible. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Sean Ennis. He is our Master of Ceremonies for tonight. I will be back up later to make some awards. Thank you very much, Mr. Sean Ennis.
Good evening, everyone. The few other people I want to acknowledge while we're doing this. I want to start with some friends of mine from the Vietnamese community who have we've been going to their ceremonies for decades, and they've always been gracious hosts, and we always appreciated it. Let's see. Okay. And then the gentleman over there with the guitar, that's Jim Riley. He is the incoming president of the Joint Veterans Council and a commissioner of the Veterans Service Commission representing the veterans of foreign wars. We've been doing this ceremony here since 2018, and we're very grateful to the city for their hosting it. Okay, we've done. And we haven't done the national anthem yet. Jim's going to do that. Oh, please rise.
I know we've got some singers here, so every year I say, please join me in singing the national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bomb bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please take your seats. Next, we will have an invocation by Chaplain Ginger McCutcheon.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Let us pray. Gracious Creator of all of us, we ask you to be with us on this 29th day of March as we remember our Vietnam veterans and those who care for them. Bless our Vietnam veterans who were left to meet the challenges they faced when they returned home alone. Bless the many who did not experience a return home as their futures were cut short and their hopes and dreams lost forever. They now dwell in your heavenly home. Bless the families of those whose names etched on the wall, who experienced the loss of a loved one without the support of our nation. With your blessing, may we offer thanks today to the more than 6 million living veterans from Vietnam and to the families, and the 9 million who served from November 1, 1955 to May 15, 1975. Be with us tonight as we welcome home our Vietnam veterans, the way they should have been 50 years ago, with honor, thanking them and their families for their sacrifice and their service. We ask these things in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Okay, next we are going to have the honor of being addressed by Mayor Burke.
Thank you, thank you. I just want to say welcome to Garfield Heights for those of you who haven't been here before. I am completely honored to be able to host another Vietnam War Veterans ceremony. You know, last year I made reference to my dad being a Vietnam veteran and how it was like to grow up with a guy like that. And, you know, we share some fun stories, and I think about him every day, you know, but one of the things I think about is some of the stories that he told when he got home. And it's just sad, it's just sad. But what we do here at Garfield Heights, we are in it to honor all of our veterans. I mean, it's something that's near and dear to my heart. This particular Memorial Day that's coming up, we are doing a huge event here. We're going to make an entire weekend out of celebrating patriotism in our country. And we're going to start it hopefully here in Garfield Heights. On the Saturday before Memorial Day, we're going to have a Touch a Truck event with the first responders. On the Sunday before Memorial Day, we are going to have some military vehicles from the National Guard here, along with a classic car ceremony. So I would hope to see each and every one of those young Marines back there to come out and help us with that, and also attend our Flags of Freedom event that we're doing here on that Sunday as well. And then, of course, Monday we're going to do the Memorial Day Parade, and we're going to honor our fallen heroes. I also want to point out that on April 15th, I usually say me and some of the guys. Well, let me just introduce you to some of the guys. I don't know if they're all here because they do have another meeting downstairs, but Sergeant First Class Avery Johnson, back there. He is Councilman of Ward 4. We have Councilman Jason Seether, and I think he's downstairs right now. And also Sergeant Chuck Donahue, who's our councilman in Ward 3, Ward 2. Jason Seether's in Ward 3. And myself are hosting a Garfield Heights Veterans Breakfast, and we're doing that on April 15th. Just remember, tax day is breakfast day here for the veterans. But just getting back to my dad and some of the stories that he told, I never will forget him telling me about when he first came back and he was dropped off at the bus station off in Cleveland and how he was treated. And I'll never forget that, and I'm not going to go into it. But I will say, on behalf of the residents of Garfield Heights, welcome home and thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, we've got some presentation to make to the young Marines. Rick, can you come back up here, please?
Can we have the young Marines front and center?
Rick's an old Marine.
I'm an old Marine. But always a Marine, right? Hoorah! We have a gold leaf U.S. Marine Corps pin, and I'm going to present one to all the young Marines here, and hopefully they'll be able to wear it on their uniform. I don't know if they can or not, but we'll see. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. did one for the other side. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. People, Gunny? Thank you very much. And Gunny, you can take your crew back if you would.
Right, face.
So a hand for the young Marines, please. Okay, next on the agenda is an address from a representative of the Vietnamese community in Cleveland, with whom we've had a decades-long relationship and very good relationship. And the David T. is going to be addressing us. The gentleman who was originally scheduled had some health problems and couldn't be here this evening. David?
Thank you, Sean.
Oh, I want to say that Dave asked me how long he should speak, and I told him as long as he doesn't exceed the amount of time that Joe Meister takes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Vietnamese community in Cleveland, I would like to thank Chapter 15 for inviting us to come to the commemoration of the Vietnam Veterans Day. We are here this evening with the participation of our members from the Vietnamese community. And ladies and gentlemen, every year on this day, we come together to remember and honor our friends in arms and people who sacrificed their life in fighting for freedom and democracy for us. We are here as the refugees from Vietnam. We have lost everything, including family members, relatives, friends, properties, and our country, South Vietnam. Therefore, we always remember and appreciate those who fought to save our country. Among them, there are 58,220 American soldiers and 286,000 Vietnamese soldiers. And millions of people died in that war. We feel sorry for people who lost their family members in that war also. We never can forget them. Thanks to Chapter 15 for making this event an opportunity for us to share the commemoration and appreciation to our veterans, and wishing everybody have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you, David. All right, next on the program, Captain David Pristash, USMC. No? They got it, that's what they got down here.
Green Beret,
Okay.
Army.
I was Army too.
I don't know why they do that, but they've done it before, too. I'm going to read this because there was a lot in here, and I don't think I could keep my memory going that long at my age. So I'm going to explain what happened to me in Vietnam and why it changed my life. At a Special Forces camp near the Cambodian border during the end of Operation Shenandoah II in late 1967, the following happened. First is the background. October through November 1967. Budap A341 was a Special Forces Green Beret CIDG camp in Phu Quang province, located in 3 Corps. And Budap had been under attack over those 2 months by VCNVA units that came across the Cambodian border and engaged our patrols, resulting in 5 Special Forces killed and 2 wounded. This resulted in the 1st Battalion, known as the Black Scarves, 2nd Infantry Division of the 1st Infantry Division, Big Red 1, being brought in and to the help in the defense of the camp on November 28, 1967. The Black Scarves Battalion was under the command of Lieutenant Colonel O'Connor, a well-liked commander by his men. Since our team captain was on patrol at the time, I gave him a sit-rep when he came in by C-123s and some CH-47s. They set up their positions next to our camp, Concertina Wire, to our north. This put us in a good defensive position, as to our east was our runway and then the rubber plantation. The VCNVA would have to attack us through the rubber. All the other directions were out because of terrain and other objectives. Shortly after the Black Scribes arrived, we started getting mortar attacks that lasted over the next several days, culminating in a major ground assault that destroyed most of the SF camp above ground on December 1st, 1967. We did win the battle. However, 2 additional Special Forces were killed and 2 more wounded. Since we lost our team house and our armory and our medical dispensary, we had a lot of work to do over the next several days, restoring power and communications and getting prepared in case we were attacked again. It was a busy time with AP reporters being there as well as the B team commander, which didn't like what we were doing. We also received 2 replacements, Master Sergeant Ernest Broom and Spec Forward Jerry Schroeder, to make up for some of our losses. Next part. Late on December 7th, 1967, the following happened. We came under attack again around 2100 hours, receiving sporadic mortar rounds and small arm fire from the northeast. There were no signs of any kind of ground assault like we had previously beaten off, and was probably just harassing fire as they withdrew their forces back across the Cambodian border. The Black Scarves did have some casualties during this period. We fired some counter-mortar fire, but I know we didn't hit anything because they moved their positions around quite often. When this attack started, I took Master Sergeant Broom and Spec Forward Schrodinger to the Fort Deuce position and stayed with them to show them what we were doing when we were under attack. That was mostly to fire illumination rounds to light up the battlefield. However, sometime around midnight that night, one of these incoming rounds landed near the mortar position, sending hot material into the ammo bunker, and that ignited the propellant charges on the stage illumination rounds. I think those in the military will know what that means. There were several intense waves of heat that went through the position, igniting everything that could burn. Fortunately, all the HE rounds were gone, or I wouldn't be here talking to you. I had on fatigues, jungle boots, steel pot, wasn't wearing my web gear, but I did have my Car 15 and was wearing a nylon flak vest. We didn't wear socks, underwear to prevent getting infections when in the jungle. The blast hit me while I was talking on a PRC-25 radio. I remember getting engulfed by waves of fire, and I could actually feel the pressure as they hit me on the back and right side. The heat set fire to my flak vest, my pants, and the nylon in the webbing of the jungle boots. I must have instinctively closed my eyes as the fireball engulfed me. As the next thing I remember, I was on the outside of the pit and my clothes were on fire. My first action was to put out the flames that were still consuming what was left of my clothing and flak vest. That probably took maybe a dozen seconds. While I was doing that, I saw the fire, there was still a fire in the mortar pit. And after I put my flames out with the dirt, I got up and saw that Master Sergeant Broom and Spec Ford Schroeder were on the ground in the pit, and there were still flames there. I think they were both unconscious. They had been behind me and closer to the source of the firestorm. I was in the process of climbing into the pit to help them when some of the other team members showed up and stopped me. Then they took care of the two men in the pit. I'm sorry I can't remember which of the men helped me at the time, but it was quite a few years later when I wrote about it. I knew I was burned, but I had no sense that I was seriously wounded. I was placed on a stretcher, and I remember getting a shot of morphine. A dust-off was called, and by 0400 hours, we were loaded on carriers, placed on UE skids, and after that we were strapped in, the UE carrying us rose into the dark night sky, and I could see the camp and the black cigar processions dropping away. Still, not realizing the extent of my injuries, I was concerned over my team, and I was thinking I'd be back in a couple of weeks. I was very wrong in this assessment of the situation. We were medevac to the 24th Evacuation Hospital in Long Bend for emergency treatment. I remember going into the triage room and answering a few questions. Later, I remember being loaded on a medical transfer plane and flown to the 106th Army Hospital in Japan. I spent 2 days there, of which I remember very little except being in a hospital ward that was dark. Then we were placed on a military hospital plane again and flown back to the States. The ride back was one of constantly dropping in and out of consciousness and blurred images of patients, nurses, IVs, and being cold. I think there was a landing for fuel somewhere, and then the three of us were taken to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. I kind of remember the ambulance ride to the hospital, but not much. Brooke Medical Center was the premier hospital in the States for burn treatment. If you were burned, this was the place to be. I had third-degree burns on my legs, second-degree burns on my arms, back, neck, face, comprising 60% of my body area. I had also inhaled gases in the pit when the firestorm blew past me, which lightly burned the inside of my mouth, tongue, and lungs. In general, I was in pretty bad shape. Months later, when I was discharged from Brooke, the doctor told me they had only given me a 10% chance of living. Lastly, as I contemplated this brush with death, I concluded that my continued life was a gift. I should have died, but I didn't, so therefore there was a reason for my continued existence. As a result, I have been driven to accomplish something ever since. This speech is the introduction to that work. What changed me? Being burned is not pleasant, and the burned person's brain reacts to this, in part by allowing the mind to hallucinate. I guess the hallucinations allow time to pass without direct knowledge of the pain in the body. I had always prided myself in being in control of my inner self. However, the pain forced me into a hallucinatory state and then into a dream world that I could not stop from happening nor recognize I was in after it happened. While in these dream states, I actually believed what was going on was real, no matter how bizarre the situation. Many of these dream states involve kind of a fight with a tiger, which made no sense to me at the time, after I woke up. After this transparent happened to me a few times, I could sense it coming on, but it was impossible to stop. I would just it would take control of me, and then I would be in another world back in Nam on patrol. During treatment at Broke, I dropped from 180 pounds to 98 pounds. Then as I began my recovery, I started to gain back my weight and have fewer and fewer hallucinatory states. The last step was getting skin grafts from my chest and upper thigh to my legs where the skin had been burned completely off. Then after healing from those operations, I had to learn to walk again, and that was a task as the grafted areas would quickly swell and become very uncomfortable. It was probably 3 or 4 years before I really felt comfortable walking, and I was never really able to run for any length of time because of the lung damage. Between the time I was wounded and leaving active duty, I spent 183 days in various military hospitals being put back together. Unfortunately, both Master Sergeant Broom and Spec 4 Schroeder died at Brooke Army Medical Center. I was the only one that made it. Ernest Broom was burned worse than me, and probably never had a chance of being saved. He was the closest to the firestorm when it ignited. He may even have shielded Jerry Schroeder and I from some of the blast. Jerry Schroeder was the least burned, and he was on his way to being released, then had been transferred to a non-critical ward. And then he developed an infection which ravaged his body with high temperatures, eventually killing him. I didn't know any of them were gone until I was released. The following paragraph is from my book I wrote about 30 years after being burned, and was something I created to summarize what happened to me that night in Vietnam. On that night in Vietnam, I was mortally wounded. All mortal wounds don't kill you immediately. I was medevaced and sent to the hospital in Texas, where I met the Grim Reaper. Soon after arriving, he told me he was coming for me, but I told him I wasn't ready. He laughed at me and said he was going to come anyway. I told him it didn't matter. Whether he came or not, I just wasn't going with him. But he wasn't to be denied, and so he visited me every night in the form of a large Bengal tiger, and we battled all night for the rights to my soul. He was very vicious and determined tiger, and he tried his best to rip the soul from my body with his sharp teeth and claws, but I was strong and stubborn, and I would not let go. The battle lasted for 2 months, and he chewed me down to 98 pounds. But in the end, I prevailed, he disappeared, and I was not dead. And he had to settle for taking the souls of the 2 men that were standing next to me in Vietnam. This was a very traumatic time for me. Then, years later, after a lot of thinking, I realized that this was a major turning point in my life that was actually beneficial to me. It showed me how vulnerable we are to what we think we know, rather than knowing what the truth is and what we don't know. The lesson learned was we are the creation of what we were taught and the life experiences we have, as received in our brains through our senses. But, and this is a big but, how do we know that we are taught and or told the truth? And even more importantly is that we are totally dependent on our senses to no matter the source, external or internal. Vietnam killed 58,155 boys, men, and a few women, plus wounding another 303,700